use it on me.
So congratulations on the new album. It's called Rhinestoned. I like it.
Thank you, Marty.
Now, I saw in the press that I got that you refer to this album as a record populated by old souls. So perhaps we can start talking about that.
Yeah, the record has a lot of sort of old concepts to it. I wrote a song about Crazy Horse. I wrote a song about the Freedom Riders. There's a
Right.
story about a World War I soldier. So there's a lot of old kind of concepts on the record.
Yeah. And when you say Crazy Horse, you're not talking about Neil's backing band, are you?
No, I'm not talking about that or the strip club that used to be on Broadway in Nashville. No.
So what caused you to touch on those subjects, though?
Once I rode with Crazy Horse. I stood by him through his divorce. I stood by him when others ran. I stood by him when war began. I have no shame or dark remorse. Once I rode with Crazy Horse.
Well, the Crazy Horse idea had been kicking around for quite a long time. There's a sort of Lakota legend that there was this cousin or a friend of his that rode with him all the way through all his battles with the Crow and the Blackfeet and the white soldiers, and it was there when he was murdered at Fort Robinson, and that he helped Crazy Horse's parents exhume his body and hide it so they wouldn't make a Wild West show spectacle out of it.
Right.
So I don't know. I'd always been kicking it around. Finally, it just came to me.
Are you a student of American history?
I am. Yes, I'm an amateur historian. Yes.
Yeah. What got you into that? Was it always that way or something?
Yeah, ever since a child. I mean, really, really young. I remember like in grade school in 4th and 5th grade, I knew more about the history we were talking about in our classes than the teachers did. And I'm sure they really were annoyed with me asking all these questions and stuff, trying to prove how smart I was compared to them.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And were your parents and whoever supportive of all that?
Yeah, for as far as they were aware of it, it got me good grades. So
there you go. Yeah, I can't argue with that, I guess.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah. So, but somehow you moved from historian to musician. What happened there?
I did, but I've carried that love of history all my life. I still read it. When I read, it's always history, almost always.
Right. Now, speaking of history, from what I understand, the album was recorded in the basement of Jim Reeves' old house. That's amazing.
That's correct. Yeah. George Bradfield, the producer of Studio, is in Jim Reeves' old house. That's where it is. And he didn't even know it when he was looking at the house.
Really?
He was just thought it was a cool house. It was kind of what he's looking for to make this studio. And then he discovered that it was Reeves' old house. And after, I think he actually already bought it or was getting ready to buy it.
And did you have the urge to sing "He'll Have to Go" to yourself all the way through it?
Yeah, or just the drums.
Lips.
I asked if he's ever heard, "Welcome to My World" singing in a disembodied voice in his halls, But he said he never had a paranormal experience.
Well, there's still time. You never know.
There's still time, yes, sir.
So you mentioned George. He's the kind of co-producer with the record, and he plays an awful lot of the instruments. So what brings the two of you together, and how do you work together on this record?
I've worked with George now for 20 years, so many records and different things, and we're just very sympathetic. I'm very fortunate, like with the Scorchers, of course, Warner did most of the co-producing or producing. So I'm used to really good guitar players producing my records, and George is a fantastic guitar player, as well as everything else. He plays about anything. Yeah.
I hear he's all over the thing. There's some fans. Was he doing the banjo picking on "I Rode with Crazy Horse"?
I think he did the banjo picking, I believe. Yeah. It was either him or Fats Kaplan.
Right. Yep. I think he's playing almost everything on that track. So what were the sessions like? Was it mostly just you and him hunkering down in the basement there working together?
Yeah, like everybody else, that's what we had to do. And it worked out okay. I've done that a lot with George anyway, so it wasn't a brand new sort of experience. I've never had a band as a solo artist, so I never had like this crack band that I wanted to bring into the studio. Right. I've always used pretty much George Bradfield, Fats Kaplan, Steve Eby, all my records.
Right. And is that a conscious decision on your part not to have a band after having a band before?
I think more economics have driven that. At first, anyway, I just couldn't afford to really have a band on the road.
Sure.
But as I've developed it, I've I really enjoyed the solo performance. You're on a tightrope, and boy, it's a real challenge. But I love it. I love that kind of challenge.
I hear you. Now, on touching on a couple of the songs, I see My Highway songs you've noted as being 100% autobiographical.
It's all a gamble, an honest bet. Will songs take me to places that I've not been yet? Do they have a vision of right and wrong? Is there a place in this world for my highway song?
So.
Yeah, my highway songs is sort of my, revealing the self-doubt that all musicians have.
Right.
Like, am I really good enough to do this? Do enough people care to like justify this when we can't pay our mortgage? So that's kind of what that song's about.
Right. And Nashville Without Rhinestones kind of addresses, it seems to me, addresses a problem of, or I don't know if it's a problem, gentrification within Nashville. You have a line in there about the town has become corrupted. So care to elaborate?
Nashville without rhinestones, it's closer than you think. Throw your records in the sea and listen to them sink. The town has been corrupted, its soul is now for sale. Nashville without rhinestones will be a perfect hell.
Yeah, that's not really a song about the Nashville music scene. Usually when people write anti-Nashville songs, it's about the, against the country music establishment. This is more about the general boomtown mentality that's just taken over. It's infected Nashville in a huge way. And they'll knock down anything to put up a tacky condominium. I mean, they'll knock down a Hank Williams statue to put up a condominium that will make them more money.
Man, that's tough. I mean, that doesn't seem right. Well, speaking of Hank Williams, you sing his "You Win Again" on the album. What made you choose that one?
Yeah, I've been singing that "You Win Again" all my life. The Scorchers used to play it quite a bit. I just felt that song needed to be on this record, needed to record it, and it also kind of shows some of the roots of country music. I dealt with quite a bit on this record.
If I remember correctly, Jerry Lee did a killer version of it, so to speak.
Yeah, that's where I first heard the song. You're right. Yeah, he did. I think he recorded it on his Sun early days.
Yeah.
I heard him play it on some sort of weird bootleg LP I had of his.
Yep.
And it was just so sad, and so and defined at the same time.
Yeah.
He was able to do that.
So when you approach a song like that, that's obviously been written and recorded by guys like Hank and Jerry Lee, do you is it intimidating? Do you try to find something new in the song, or do you just try to catch that vibe?
Yeah, when you sing a song like that, you definitely got to step up and believe that you can pull it off. And I think we did. I think it's a pretty good version.
Right. And going back even further, you cover a Carter family tune, the Storms Are on the Ocean, which sounds a bit like a sea chanty, and has somebody named Christie Rose singing along with you on that. So.
The storms are on the ocean, the heavens may cease to be, this world may lose its motion, love, if I prove false to thee. Yeah, Christie's an old friend of mine. She's a Fats Kaplan's wife, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
And we're old dear friends.
Right.
And I've used her on duets quite a few times over the years. She always steps up. Right. She sings a lot like Perry Baggs, the Scorchers drummer, sang all those harmonies with me in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
She sings a lot like him. She doesn't try to blend, and she doesn't try to, make a big polyphonic kind of approach to her harmonies. She does, like, she's going in there as the lead singer.
Right. Yeah.
She's competing with me, and we mix her that way. It's the same way we did Perry.
Right. Now, I see you've dedicated the album to freedom riders, and there's a song called "The Freedom Riders Weren't Free."
Time is more forgiving the farther back you look. It it's easier to cut some slack to someone from a book. But when somebody smiles and says, well, what's done is done, you wonder what side they took in 1961.
It seems to me this is a topic that's a lot of people are addressing these days, and especially in and around Nashville, possibly something that may not have been discussed in years past. What made you want to feel like you wanted to write about this?
That's a good point, Marty. Nashville has a huge civil rights history. I mean, it played a huge role in the 1950s and 60s in the civil rights struggles, and no one ever talked about it.
Right.
I didn't even know it. I'm an amateur historian. I didn't really know about it until about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I started discovering that the Freedom Rides, the second wave of the Freedom Rides, may never have happened without a bunch of Nashville college students. The first wave, it fell apart after that terrible bombing in Aston. And it was, the idea kind of was dying on the vine. And a bunch of college kids, without any sort of national support from the NAACP or the Kennedy administration, they just sat around in their dorm rooms and said, we can't let this ride. We can't let those people win this battle. So they just emptied their pockets and they emptied their wallets of all their money. And they got together and they found out they had enough money to like send maybe a couple dozen down to Alabama to take it on again, to get on those buses. That's what they did. Right. They just took their money, went down the tickets without any lawyers, without any support at all. Yep. A bunch of kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, and got on those damn buses and reignited the whole storm. But this time, the national press paid a lot more attention to them, and they were thrown in jail, they were beaten, they were treated horribly. But the second wave really took hold and eventually won that chapter of the fight.
Right. And what's the
Nashville
vibe?
kids.
What's the vibe like in Nashville and around the country these days? Do you feel like things have changed at all, or are changing, or capable?
I can't believe the amount of change that's happening. I'm sure that if you talk to an African American, they would probably say not fast enough. But
yeah,
from my perspective, I see change that I never thought I would see in my lifetime, especially in terms of the Confederate monuments.
Oh yeah.
I thought they were sacrosanct. I thought they would never come down, and it wouldn't even be talked about. I wrote a song called "Rebel Flag in Germany" in 2004, and was roundly just beaten up for that. Nobody said, "Hey, great idea, great song." Everybody said, "This is all wrong, and you're wrong, and we want to beat you up if we ever see you in a dark place." So I never thought that would happen. I never thought that Confederate lost cause myth would ever be questioned. I never thought in America, United States of America, anyone would ever say anything negative about Robert E. Lee.
Right.
For example, that was just something you didn't do. Everybody was anti-racism, but no one would really question the Confederate symbolism and the Confederate mythology. That's happening now. It's happening big.
Yeah. And I assume that you must run into that when, like you mentioned, when you talk to fans at shows and they react to some of this stuff. And I'm wondering, well, obviously you probably haven't played out much recently, so I don't know how much contact you've had with the masses, but is there a sea change happening there as well?
I think that my fan interactions would reflect what's happening in the broader country.
Yeah.
That's to be expected. On January 6th, I went online the next day and said, this is a terrible, tragic thing, and one of the worst chapters of American history that I'd seen in my lifetime. And it wasn't, I thought that was pretty much anyone would kind of agree with that. But it wasn't. There was a lot of folks that actually took real offense to me saying that and said they weren't going to listen to my music anymore. And other people did support it. But, it was, I was pretty nuanced. I wasn't really direct about, the people that were doing it. I just said, this is wrong and this is terrible. But that's to be expected. You can't escape the political intensity of the United States anymore. It really is two sides arguing with each other almost constantly.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to music then, because people will probably complain that we're talking about politics. We should be
Even
talking-
that much. That's right.
I've had that already. There's a
Even
song
that
called
much.
Keep the Promise at near the end. It's a real rocker, and I think you play some harmonica on that.
Yeah, you can keep that promise, keep it to yourself. Yeah, you may want to use it on somebody else, but if you want to use it, don't use it on me. Time to put the harm back in harmonica.
Keep That Promise was originally written to be a Jason and the Scorchers song.
Ah,
For some reason, the guys just didn't want to do it. So I held on to it, and this record seemed to be it fit perfectly. And I wanted to have a kind of that Scorcher feel, that kind of edge to it, that kind of energy. So playing a loud, amped up harmonica, that's one way to get there.
gotcha. So I realize nobody's playing out anywhere, but are Jason and the Scorchers a going concern still, or what's the status?
I think the status of the Scorchers is always in question, and I don't think we ever even know.
Right.
There's a lot of people think we've broken up or retired, but in 2019 we did a full-on tour of the UK with Dan Baird and with the Kentucky Headhunters.
Oh man, that would have been a good one.
Yeah, it was a heck of a bill. So we still do shows. It's just not very often. We can never seem to record together though. It just me and Warner can never seem to get that together.
Right. Well, if you see an album like this, what does it make you think of?
How about that, Marty? Yeah, you do go back to the 80s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't, no matter what happens with the Scorchers, I always feel good about that period of the band because we made some really cool stuff then. Fervor, that one, and Lost and Found in particular.
I mean, Americana these days is a wide-ranging thing, but it's a big deal. But back when you were making records like that, you were kind of at the forefront of that, and nobody knew quite what to make of it back then.
That's correct. It was hard to sell. We were able to get a little bit of traction, like in American radio and stuff in the press and on MTV, but it was a hard sell.
Yeah.
There just wasn't an existing audience for it in those days, like there is now with the whole outlaw country phenomenon.
Yeah.
Chris Stapleton, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But in those days, there was just a few of us doing it. Blasters, X,
Yep.
Georgia Satellites, us, Joe Ely, people like that, Steve Earle.
Yep. Did you feel like a camaraderie with those folks? Do you guys talk about it amongst yourselves?
We did. Yeah, we did. We did. For example, the Georgia Satellites, we play a lot of shows with those guys. It did full tours with those people. And yeah, I'd run into, Jeff Pierce from the Gun Club, and we kind of talk about stuff like that, or Dave Alvin from the Blasters.
Yeah. And what did you talk about? Did you just like, what are we doing? Or why aren't we just playing rock and roll like the rest of the world? Synthesizers?
Yeah, but by and large, we were the same as all rock and roll musicians everywhere. Bluegrass musicians, when they get together, when jazz musicians get together, they talk about music and chord structures. When bluegrass musicians get together, they play. When rock and roll musicians get together, we talk about equipment. That's the truth.
Very cool. So what have you got planned next? Are you thinking in terms of what are you going to do after this record's out?
I haven't thought about what's next. I don't really have a long-term plan. I'll have fun with this record as long as it goes on and as long as it's making some noise out there.
Yeah. Well, you should come down to New Zealand sometime if you get a chance.
I'd love to. I only was there one time. We toured the world so much, but we only got to New Zealand one time. We got to play both the North and the South Island, and I loved it. It was I was just stunned by the beauty, and the audiences were quite good.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's a very strong Americana scene here. And we have some folks from the States that moved here and just homegrown people, especially from down in Christchurch and Littleton and place, and a producer down there who has a studio, and they crank out amazing stuff. So it's
and I thought that even the one time we were there. I think we played Wellington, Christchurch, and Auckland.
Yeah,
had a great time.
Fantastic.
The people were so hip.
Yeah, they would have loved you, I'm sure. Fantastic. Well, thank you for talking to me. I love hearing the new record. Hope it does well. I don't even know what that means anymore, but top of the charts, selling millions.
Well, yeah, I'm just loving making connections with people. That's what it's all about now. It's really cool to think that my music is going to connect with somebody's heart and soul. That's pretty heavy stuff. Even if it's just a few people, there's still something to think about, take seriously.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. Have a good day.
My pleasure, Marty. Great talking to you.
You
All
too.
the best to you.
You too. Bye-bye.